In this video, I'm going to show you how to install a well pump. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. Here are all the supplies and tools that we'll need for this well pump installation. And I'm going to begin from the pump and then work my way up to the water line so you can understand how it kind of goes together. We got our 3/4 horsepower well pump itself, and it's submersible, meaning it's going to go into the water and it's going to pump it from here up through the pump. And this is a 2-wire well pump, meaning that we got 2 hots and then a ground. And there's also a 3-wire, so it all depends on what you have as a setup, but for this setup it's going to be a 2-wire. And then from the well pump itself, we're going to go over to this barbed adapter, and this is going to thread right into the top of the well pump. And it's going to depend on what well pump you have to what size threads you're going to need here. This is 1.25 inch thread. And then from that, we're going to hook to our polyethylene pipe. So this black pipe is considered polyethylene, and that's what you want for whenever you have a water line that's going to be submerged into a well. And this is rated for up to 160 psi, so it depends on your well pump how much of a rating you need for your water line. And then from there, we're going to go to this adapter. It's another barbed adapter. So 1 inch, it's going to thread into this Pitless adapter, and this is bronze. And this is going to be what you want whenever you go through your well casing. So I'm going to show you how to install this in a bit. At each barbed connection, we're going to use the 2 hose clamps, and that's going to keep our security to keep a watertight seal to the black pipe to the barb. We have another barbed fitting that's going to thread into the Pitless adapter. Then that's going to go to the house from here with more black pipe. In order to protect the black pipe, we're going to use corrugated pipe to house the water line. And it's just going to add some protection so a rock doesn't poke through that water line eventually. And we have rope here, and this is nylon braided, and that's going to go down with the well pump in order to add some extra security. Then we got our 12-2 wire here, and this is for submersible pumps, and this is very important to use. You don't want to use standard Romex. You got to get the correct wire, and it depends on the horsepower of your pump, what gauge wire you need. So again, this 3/4 horsepower, and it's going to use 12-2 wire. And then we have these shrink tubes. These are going to allow us to have watertight seals around our connections here to the submersible pump. Very important, we must use this. And we also have these self-clamping guards, and these are going to go around our electrical and our water line as it's going down into the well. Very important to have these. It's also important to install what's called a torque arrestor. This is just going to help stabilize the water line and well pump all as one unit. Just help keep that torque from when the pump kicks on and off. Electrical tape for wire management. And now we have all of our tools. We got a homemade drop rod, and this simply is a T-bar more or less that's going to be used to lower our whole setup down into the well once we get put together. So you must have one of these. And this is a 1 inch threaded pipe. And we got our standard tape measure marker. We're going to have to use a torch for our shrink tubes and to make our connections. We got our pipe wrench, and I'll show you how to use all these tools here in a bit for what we're doing. But we have wire strippers, the crescent wrench, a sawzall, a 1 3/4 hole saw. We've got our wrenches to take our well cap off. And then when we make our connections, we want to make sure we use some type of Teflon tape, and that's going to give us some nice watertight seals. So let's get to installing all this stuff. I'm going to begin by removing the well cap, and we just have 4 bolts holding it on, a simple socket and wrench, and this just happens to be an 11mm, so it could be different with all different types of wells, obviously. Something cool to know about underneath of the cap, we got our well depth, and we got 200 foot here. We got how much casing we have down, because the casing doesn't go all the way down. It's usually just around the top of the well. The well casing really just needs to go down till it hits something solid. So it's 27 feet here. I had a well one time where the casing was way deeper than that because it was really sandy ground. So you can just remember that if you do get a well drilled, if you have sandy soil, it may be cased really far down. And then we got our gallons per minute. We got 40, which is a lot of water. And this is the date it was done, and this was this year. So that's a good reference because we need to know these values for what we need for the depth of the well pump that needs to go down. You can also do the pebble drop test to see how deep the water is from the top. Go ahead. It's not very far from the top. I have the pump sitting next to the well because we're going to have to start from here when we lower it into the well, so we might as well just put it together next to it. And something I'd like to mention, at the end of this pump, we have a check valve. It's called an inline check valve, and what that does, whenever you pump water up through, it stops the water from coming back down through the pump, so it's going to keep the water in the lines. So if your well pump does not have a check valve, you're going to have to install a check valve. And you can install it anywhere, typically in line from the pump up to the top of the casing. So if you had to install one later for whatever reason, you could pull the well pump up and install the check valve next to the top of the well if you wanted to. But in this case, it has one built into it, so we don't need to have one technically in line, just so you know. The polyethylene pipe typically comes in rolls of 100-foot increments. We have a 200-foot roll here because we need to go down 180 feet total. So we like to roll out the whole roll before installing it onto the pump. Also, because it's in a roll, it typically wants to try to coil back up. It's nice to lay it out a day or two ahead of time if possible, so that way it gives it time to relax. In order to install the barbed adapter, I'm going to place Tef tape and then some pipe dope or thread sealant, whatever term you want to use, in order to thread this into the end of this pump. So we're going to make several wraps around this section first. Make sure you place this on in a clockwise fashion, so that way whenever you tighten up the adapter, it doesn't interfere with the Tef tape. And I like to use the pipe dope with it. It just acts as like a lubricant in order to thread this on a little easier. Now that that's prepped, we're going to thread this into the pump. I'm now going to use my adjustable wrench to tighten this down all the way. And because I could get leverage on the pump while I tighten that, you could also put a monkey wrench on this to hold it into place while you tighten that up. But I feel like that's very secure there. To install the polyethylene pipe to the barb fitting, we gotta slide our hose clamps over the black pipe now, remove the end cap, and then we're gonna push it onto the barb fitting. And because it's warm out, it might go on okay, and if it was cold out, you may have to heat this up first. Yep, it's getting tight, so we're going to use our torch. Just heat this up some so it's a little more pliable to slide on all the way. And it's typical that we have to do this, so not out of the ordinary. Now that the pipe is on the barb fitting, I'm going to slide my hose clamps down, and these need to be just about a ½ inch from each end or so. Nothing really rocket science here. We just got to tighten it up using a socket. Just don't over tighten these clamps because they can strip pretty easy. Just snug them up really well, and this is a 8mm. Since this barbed adapter is relatively long, you could also install 3 hose clamps here if you feel like it's necessary. To install the torque arrestor, this is in 2 parts, so it goes right around the pipe. I'm just going to come up about 6 inches from the pump. Right around here should be fine. And I got my pipe clamps here that came with the kit, and they're going to go right around here and then just clamp it onto the water line. Before I tighten this one, we're going to balloon this out a little bit, about like so. Not too much, about right there should be fine, and then tighten that up. To make the wire connection, I'm going to unroll this wire here. I got the end of the roll wire. I'm going to separate these 3 wires so that way we can make our connections using the utility knife. Using wire strippers, I'm going to strip off about a 1/2 inch of the casing. And since this is stranded, it seems to be that you need to use the little bit higher gauge here to strip off this casing. So I'm going to use the 10 slot here, even though this is 12 gauge wire. And you can see it stripped it off fine. Now do that to all of them. And if you need to purchase any of these tools like these wire strippers, I'll put a link in the description below so you can check them out for yourself. I'm going to use my shrink tubes and slide one of these over each one of these wires. Yeah. This is the metal crimp connector that came with the shrink tubes, and these indicate that I'm going to cut this down a little bit. There's a stop here right in the middle, so it looks like we need to cut this down so there's about a 1/4 inch of wire exposed. I'm going to slide this right over that wire. Then we're going to crimp that over the end of the wire using a pair of vice grips. Yeah. Do that to all these wires. I'm now going to connect the pump's wire to the roll wire, and I'm going to start out with the ground here, and that's going to be the middle wire. And then do that to the 2 hot wires. We're now going to place our shrink wrap tube starting with the ground right over that joint. You want to get that right in the middle there, so about right in there. To shrink the tube, I'm going to use the torch and then just wave it and then get this to shrink right around here so we have a watertight seal. And do that to the other connections here. As you can see, we now have watertight connections, so that should be fine in the submerged water. I'm going to turn this over to get to this loop, and we're going to tie our nylon string to here, and that way it'll be able to support the pump, take some pressure off of it. We're going to simply tie this onto this loop. I'm going to start by making a loop here. All right. All of our connections are made at the pump, and now we got to secure and manage the rope and the wire. I'm going to roll the rope and the wire out the length of the water line, and we need 180 feet to go down into the well. So that's going to be the length more or less of the rest of this pipe. So I'm just going to unroll both now. I'm going to wrap these wires with the electrical tape just to help keep these bundled up better so they lay into the well better. I'm going to come right up above this torque arrestor. We're going to take our tape and just wrap it to secure everything kind of into place so that it's all in a nice bundle. To install the guards, they simply go right around the water line, and then they're just going to clamp like so, and that's what's holding them to the water line. And then we'll take our rope and our wire, and we're going to place them into these slots here. So we're going to place this right here, and then the wire right in here. And that's all there is to the guards, and we place these guards about every 20 feet or so, going up the water line till we get to the top. So we'll place a guard, and then we'll tape in between the guards with the electrical tape to manage the rope and the wire. Our excavator dug out beside of the well casing in order to connect our well pump too. And if you want to know why there's a trench right here behind me, that's because our electric's coming through here. So this has nothing to do with the water line here behind us. So it's going to go straight to the house from here. And we're going to drill right in this area. That's about 40 inches. Anywhere below 36 inches is totally fine here. The frost line, in fact, is only about 24 inches. So we're going to be clear down here, so that's totally fine. And remember our T-bar that we have for the installation, it's 47 inches. So as long as we ain't longer than 47 inches from the top of this casing, we're totally fine. So we're going to drill it right here at 40 inches. This hole needs to be 1 3/4 inches, so I got an 1 3/4 inch hole saw here to drill out for the adapter. And just so you know, sometimes these are metal and not plastic like this one, and you'd have to get a hole saw that could handle metal. We're now going to install this pitless adapter. To prep it for the installation, I just have to remove this large nut and then this plate and washer that's going to go on the outside of the casing in order to drop it into the well. Remove this and then this one washer here. On this pitless adapter, we have the part that gets threaded onto the T-bar or drop bar, and it's blank. There's nothing in here other than the threads. And this side is the side where the water flows up through, so you can easily distinguish which side you got to thread your T-bar onto. Also, on this particular one, it's labeled top, so you can easily distinguish which side to place your drop bar. And now we're going to thread this onto our T-bar to drop it into the well. This side of the bar is the handle. This side gets dropped down to the well, and I'm simply going to take my pitless adapter and thread it right onto the bar. We're now ready to install this into the well. I'm going to have him lower the pitless adapter down using the T-bar to the hole that we drilled out. And then I'm going to use my pipe wrench, and I have the nut and the washer and then the rubber washer in order to install it onto the casing. All right, if you want to drop it right down in here, and he's going to lower it and come out this hole. He's fishing it down, and once he gets to this area, I'm going to go ahead and grab it and pull it through. All right, and I'm going to make sure we're tight against that casing, and just simply place my rubber washer first. Then this washer, the brass one, this is going to fit the shape of the casing. So we want to make sure we place it on like so. And then we're going to tighten this nut on over that. Then after it's hand tightened, we're going to take our pipe wrench, tighten it up even more. We now have the adapter installed through the casing. We now just got to lift up on our T-bar to dislodge it from the adapter and then install it onto the other end of the water line. All right, simply going to pull this up out of there. And now we need to place this onto the end of the water line. Going to remove this right off the pipe. All right, we're going to prep this and install it into the pipe. This side gets the adapter because this is where the water is going to come up through. So we're going to thread it into here using our crescent wrench and our pipe wrench. We install this into here just like we installed the last barb connector into the well pump. This needs installed on the end of the water line now. He is standing at the end of the well pump and holding the tape measure as I walk it out to measure the distance in which we want to submerge the well pump down into the well. We measured up to 180 feet. As you remember, the well is 200 feet deep from the top of the casing, but then this is going down the ground about 4 feet. So if we cut this at 180, it brings us up off the bottom about 15 feet or so. So that's about where we want it. You can have these down as low as 5 feet off the bottom, but in case there's sediment, we want to keep it up far enough for us. So we're going to cut this right here with the Sawzall first. Going to deburr the pipe here. And just like the other barb connection, we're going to use 2 clamps. We're just going to push this in. I'm going to thread the T-bar onto the end of the Pitless adapter now, so that way we're ready to go. So as this slides down into the well, this will be already on the end and we don't have to think about it. I'm going to just thread this right at the very end here, and this is a 1-inch pipe. Again, this doesn't need sealed because we're going to unthread this after it's installed into the well. So just thread it on good until it's snug, and that's good right there. It's now time to lower the well pump down into the well. There's two common ways to do this. One, there's a wheel that you can get and you can lower it in that way, and that's going to be the much easier approach. But we always just done it with manpower. So me and my helper is going to lower it down. I actually have a third person at the very end of the water line that's going to guide the T-bar and all that end. So that way we know it's going to flow easily as we drop it. So we're going to do that now. All right, you ready? Okay, we're just going to slowly lower this down into the well. Nice and easy. And it's much lighter before you get water into this water line. So if you ever have to pull your well pump up, it's way heavier because you're going to have water all through this black pipe. I heard it just hit the water, so the water is actually going to help it feel a little lighter compared to what it really is. We're now going to use our bar to hook it onto that adapter. Now that we're onto that adapter, we can unthread the T-bar. And the pump is in the well. Now this section of polyethylene pipe is actually going into the house where we're going to have our pressure tank. So we're going to connect this to the Pitless adapter, and I'm going to walk it out so we can cut it to length. He's going to go ahead and roll out the wire right now that's going to hook to the well pump. So we got to tie that together at the top of the casing. We're going to sleeve the electric and water line in this black corrugated pipe. You could also use PVC pipe, anything that helps sheathe and protect your water line, electric line, very important. We're going to wrap electrical tape around this end to hold this so when we fish our pipes over it, it'll be easier. I must install a barbed fitting here to hook our water line to it. And again, we're just going to use Teff tape and pipe dope to make our connection. So really not too much to explain here that you don't already know from the other clips. So I'm going to install this now into this adapter. I'm now going to cut this pipe to length. So if we cut it right here, looks like that should be plenty long enough. And I'm just going to use my ratchet pipe cutter here. I'm going to slide on my hose clamps. We're going to go ahead and start pushing it onto that fitting. This wire that's going to the pressure tank from the house, this is UFB wire, and this is for being placed in the ground, just so you know. And this is by Colonial, and that's why it's white. I ain't used to seeing the white UFB because we usually use Romex. We're going to get this to come up through in the cap of the well. So we're going to actually pivot this around and loosen these nuts up first to get it directly in line with our water line. I'm going to install a piece of 3/4 inch conduit up through this hole. This cap essentially pops out, and then we're going to slide our conduit down through it. And then we'll cut it to length. So right there is at the bottom next to the water line. So we're going to cut it off right here. You could also install a threaded adapter on the end of the conduit to thread into the cap of the well. As long as you have protection on the outside of the well casing, that's all that really matters. I'm going to fish my wire into the conduit. Fish this wire right up through that hole. And I'm now going to make my electrical connections here. So we have plenty for forgiveness. We're just going to cut this a little longer than we need. And the same goes with this. Now I'm going to strip the ends of these wires to make our connections. And you'll notice it's always difficult to strip this UF casing because it's so thick. Now we just strip our wires. And this is 12 gauge wire. Now if you remember when we hooked our pump to this wire, we used the center one for our ground, but I did notice this is labeled ground on this side, but because this wire is typically having the ground in the center, that's why I use the center, so just keep that in mind. So we're going to hook our grounds up first. I'm going to twist this together and then install our wire nut. This just twists on. And just FYI, this wire is not hooked to anything right now. It's just sitting dead in the house. So if there was power going to this, obviously we'd kick the breaker before doing this. Then we just hook our hot here and then our other hot here. So this is labeled white, but since this is a 230, this is going to actually be acting as a hot. So this isn't necessarily a neutral. Both these are going to be hots. Now we're going to finish our other two connections. I'm now going to wrap electrical tape around all of my wire nuts and then tie it all together with electrical tape. I'm going to wrap all these together. Now our connection is now made for our electric. Now we're going to flex this down into the well. And as far as the rope goes, we're going to fish it down here beside this pipe and pull it through. Keep it a little snug there, and then we're going to wrap it around the well casing. Now we're going to reinstall the cap here. Place our bolts in each corner to fasten it back to the cap. For the final walkthrough, as you can see, we've got our electric coming down, going to the house. Our water line is all protected, going over to the house in the trench. So all this is going to be backfilled after we run the electric line for the meter. And let me show you the inside here. Here is the other end of the water line that's going out to the well pump that we just connected. And here's that white wire. And right here's the pressure tank. So all this needs hooked up yet before it's functional. And there's also going to be a power going over to the panel box as well. So if you want to see how I'm going to install this pressure tank, check out this video. It'll help you out.